How you doing, folks? You're watching Live with Onrie, not Onward with Onrie Live anymore. We have changed things up a little bit. I have decided to bring back my journeyman episodes of my show, and that is Onward with Onrie, which is a completely separate thing. And then I have Live with Onrie, which is what I've been doing recently by having guests come on the show. I know it all sounds confusing, and I apologize for it. I'm still figuring this out because, honestly, I have no idea what I'm doing. But I do have an incredible guest today, and he actually knows what he's doing. And now for the next hour, I'm going to have the opportunity and the honor to pick his brain and find out everything he knows about comics. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the Mike Barron to the show. Mike, welcome to Live with Onrie. How are you, sir?
Good, thank you.
Thank you for taking the time to join us today. You hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. You heard me. Okay, great. All right. Well,
I may seem unresponsive. That's just because I'm slow.
It's okay. Don't worry about it. Well, do us all a favor. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you got going on. I'm going to give you the spotlight.
Okay. I broke into comics in 1981 with Nexus, a science fiction superhero title I created with artist Steve Rude. We were in the right place at the right time. Capital City Distribution, the second largest comic book distributor in the world at the time, wanted to publish their own comics. So I'd met Dude a little earlier, and we were brainstorming, and I went home and I cooked up Nexus, and I drew the first 12 pages out by hand, which is how I used to write comics. I'd take a legal pad, I'd draw a page on it, I'd break it up into panels, and I'd fill each panel step by step like an inchworm. I wanted someone dramatic. I wanted a dramatic series, and I thought if every time the protagonist showed up, somebody died, that would be dramatic. It's not a new idea. So many television and movies are based on that. Law and Order, Gunsmoke, all those lawyer shows, all those doctor shows, all those police shows, they're all based on the drama of a life and death situation, which is why TV favors that type of show. So Dude drew it. You know, it was like the second time we'd worked together. Those 12 pages, we took them in and showed them to the boys at Capitol, and they said, yeah, give us a book. Now, for some reason known only to them, they released the first 3 issues of Nexus as oversized black and white. And they're almost impossible to obtain today, the originals, but they've been reprinted many times and are readily available from Dark Horse. After the 3rd issue, they switched to standard comic book size in full color. And they published 6 issues of Nexus, and then they said, hey, we don't know what we're doing. And First Comics stepped up and said, we want these titles. So they sold the titles to First Comics, and we were with First for years afterwards and did over 100 issues of Nexus, and they're well over 100 issues of Nexus now, and many issues of Badger, probably about 80 issues of Badger. And then First was circling the drain, and they sold the title Nexus to Dark Horse, but they kept Badger for themselves. In fact, First still owns Badger. I've been able to work with him with their permission over the years, and I expect to do so again. And we are talking about a new comic book series with a new publisher. But Mike Richardson of Dark Horse returned the copyright and trademark to Steve Rude and I. It's an unprecedented act of generosity that's never been repeated, as far as I know, in the world of comics or publishing. But we continue to publish with Nexus. And Nexus, there will be new material from Dark Horse next year from Nexus. And because of that comic and Badger, I started to get calls from Marvel and DC. Marvel asked me to write The Punisher. DC asked me to write The Flash. And I had a career in comics for 30 years.
That is absolutely incredible. And just to think about, you know, how you can go from, because I mean, everybody's creating comics, right? Everybody's got a title that they're coming out with, and they're hoping that the next title they come out with is going to be that hit that gets them that callback. Now, you've been doing creator-owned work way like before I was born. I was born in '82. So that's
no,
when you...
I wasn't. I'm glad to say that I was not. Well, all right, 81. 80, you're right. But it wasn't creator owned at that time. It wasn't until years later that it became creator owned.
But it was still not a superhero book, right? I mean, not a Marvel or DC
Oh,
superhero book.
Nexus is sui generis. There's nothing like it.
Yeah. So here you are with this kind of, let's just say, a foreign concept, and you're bringing this to the comic book industry, which back then, I mean, when I got into comics, I had one go at it with Diamond, and I discovered that my distribution channel was comic conventions. The direct market is now kind of like a small facet of what my overall sales could ever be, even if I wanted it to, even if I had more involvement with it.
Right.
But you were playing in a different time. Now, Capital City Comics, there were a lot of distributors back then. There was Diamond, Capital City, and a whole bunch of other ones. What was it like back then? I mean, let's go back in time. You got this idea, you make this thing work. You're not even working off of a computer. I think that even blows my mind even more. It's like you're just literally writing on a notepad.
Every day we would send off the scripts via FedEx, and FedEx would deliver to us copies of the pencils by the artists. And we would work, and Marvel and DC each had FedEx accounts. They had huge bills, and that's how we communicated with each other. Capital City had a warehouse on the Beltline in Madison, a big warehouse, and the comics came in every Wednesday night, I think, and I would go out there, and the place would go crazy. The people, they'd be blasting rock and roll.
That's
real
so
loud.
fucking awesome.
Yeah, well, they're packing these boxes, and there were a lot of rock and rollers that worked there. And John Davis himself, one of the owners of very fine blues guitars, but there were guys there that were in bands. I knew drummers and guitarists and bass players out there, and sometimes they'd get together and jam, the kind of the Capital City Jam. It was just a lot of fun. But when the distributors started toppling like dominoes, Capital City was forced to sell out to Diamond. And that was a long time ago. And ever since then, Milton Greep, who was the president of Capital City, has run the website icv2.com, which is probably your best one-stop news site for geek fandom. It covers comic books, gaming, and movies. icv2.com stands for Internal Correspondence, Volume 2.
Yes, this is also the site too where most of the most important industry news gets dropped. Now, okay, so we're back in time. All right. And I want to do kind of I don't know if you've seen the documentary The Last Dance, but I kind of want to jump forward and back in time. Okay, so back then you had a new comic coming out, and you had fucking rock bands showing up, the Wednesday nights because your comic was out, and you got to party and you got to hang out, you got to meet your fans. You got to sign books for them and do all kinds of cool shit. Now, let's jump in our time machine and go to today. And you got this incredible book that is on Indiegogo right now. Incredible concept. I had the pleasure and honor of having your artist on the book, Ted Mulrooney, on as a guest a couple weeks ago. And now there's this whole new facet of promotion and getting money in order to make your comic an actual thing, and it is not as romantic as what you just said. I want there to be rock bands playing when my fucking comics come out, man. So what's it like now? I mean, what's different? What's changed? What do you feel is working better? What do you think is working worse?
Well, I think that the traditional distribution service has deteriorated, and I also think the quality of the work from the big two has deteriorated, and their books are circulating at a mere fraction of what they used to in the 80s and 90s. And I have to say a lot of that is due to their content. I'm not going to comment on the content, but the writer's first duty is to entertain. And I think that in some ways they've lost sight of that. If you don't entertain your audience, they're not going to turn the page. Now, everything I do, everything I write, my first goal is to grab the reader by the throat and drag him into the narrative to the exclusion of all else. I want that reader to be so absorbed in either my book or my comic that they resent any intrusion. The essential question in all fiction is what happens next? And the reader has to care to keep turning the page. Well, how do you make the reader care? There are a million tricks. You can have a compelling story, a compelling concept. You can have a fascinating character like Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock Holmes endures, not only because he's in the public domain, but he endures because people can't get enough of that personality. He's so fascinating, the way he acts. I remember watching the BBC series with Benedict Cumberbatch, in which he keeps announcing he's a high-functioning sociopath. And I thought that was a pretty amazing insight. It was right on to a certain degree. You can keep the reader glued with a seductive narrative voice. Now, that's harder to do in a comic, which is a visual medium and not so much as words. It's essential to a good novel. But I use every trick in the book. Compelling plot, compelling characters, seductive narrative voice. And of course, if it's a comic, you have to have a great artist. You have to have good art, because good art will carry bad writing a lot better than bad art will carry good writing. And I've been blessed to work with Todd Mulrooney on this project. You've seen his art, and it's hard.
Incredible. Yeah, absolutely incredible.
Yeah. And I'm excited about the prospects of crowdfunding because, as you know, I haven't been able to get any gigs with the regular publishers for many years. And I'm frankly surprised at the reaction we're getting. We just finished a crowdfunder for my Nexus novel, and I was really surprised at the reaction we got to that. My wife Ann ran that, and she exceeded all expectations. Now, Chris Brawley is running the Florida Man crowdfunder, and Chris runs a video service professionally. That's what he does for a living. And if you watch the Florida Man video, it shows. I mean, that's the slickest little video I've ever seen. Also, if you watch it, you'll laugh out loud. And that's our goal with Florida Man. I guarantee you that you will laugh out loud multiple times while reading this comic. Your head will explode and your eyes will pop out of this.
I don't doubt that. I do not doubt that. There is one part where I just saw this one image and I laughed. It was the ad for the attorney at law.
Oh yeah.
And I forgot what it said right now, but I remember seeing it, and we'll get you screwed one way or another. I forgot what it was, but
that's not what it said. But it's based on local ambulance chasers. Have you been struck by a car and the insurance company refuses to give you what you deserve?
Yeah.
Call who is that guy? Franklin.
Here, let me see if I can pull it up real quick.
Oh yeah, we're talking about Habib Rodriguez is the guy in the
Habib Rodriguez, yes. And it really, like I was saying to Todd when he was on the show, it really reminds me a lot of one of my favorite shows, Eastbound and Down, which is just raw, doesn't apologize for any of the content down there, and just it's funny. And I think
watch that.
Yeah, absolutely. And here's the thing that I gotta say is that I totally agree with what your agenda is as a writer, because right now we need escapism more than ever. And while I think it's important to not avoid topics that are important to us personally, like it's one of the greatest things about being an American is being able to express our thoughts, especially when you have platforms like social media, which allow you to do it so openly. But when you have something like a comic book, that's like your time to get away. And I have to agree with you that a lot of the stuff that's been coming out from Marvel or DC has been hit or miss. There has been stuff that I've liked, but there's been a lot more that I could not care less about. The most engaging stuff for me right now is stuff that is coming out from independent publishers. And even though it's created by the same creators, it feels like those creators have so much more freedom to tell the stories that they want without worrying about, offending anybody, because, that's what happens now. If you put out an issue of Captain America, half of the people are going to like it and half of the people are going to hate it. And, you as the writer need to be thinking about not catering to the audience, but telling the most engaging story, like you're saying, pulling them in by the throat and not letting go until the story is finished and keeping them guessing.
I have to be excited about anything I write, but I know how to maintain my level of excitement. I always say a writer has to entertain himself before he can entertain others. And you also have to surprise yourself before you surprise others. And where do the surprises come from? They come from the characters themselves. When you create a compelling character and it becomes three-dimensional in your mind, that character will turn around and start telling you where the story goes. And I think every writer who's worth his salt has noticed this. So I write a detailed outline ahead of time, and the outline's designed to entertain too. I want people to read that outline and then say, where's the book? But about halfway through each outline, I find myself changing the story for the better, or I wouldn't do it. I have a pretty good sense about those things because the character has surprised me, or because I've stumbled upon a new angle. I'm constantly surprising myself when I'm writing, and I love those little surprises. And one of the things I do is I keep my eyes and ears open, and I carry a notepad with me at all times and a pen. And I write down every idea I have, and I write down anything that interests me. Sometimes it's just a name. I'll hear a name that resonates, that's unusual, and I'll write that down with an eye to using it in a later story. Or a title. Sometimes a story can just come from a title, like Drunk Octopus Wants to Fight. That was a meme I saw on. Many people have seen it. It's a picture of a coat hanger. It looks like an octopus with two fists up and X's for eyes. It's a coat hanger. Have you seen it? Do you know what I'm talking about?
No, I don't. But I mean, yeah, send it to me later
Drunk
on.
Octopus Wants to Fight. Well, I love that. I haven't found the story for that yet, but I will. But in terms of Florida Man, Florida Man came about because he kept coming at me. Every time I went online or went to a news site, there was another Florida Man story. And you know what they are. Florida Man claims rectum found in syringe is not his. Florida Man arrested for defecating on traffic from light pole. Florida Man vows to kill neighbors with kindness. Kindness is the name of his machete. Florida Man leads police for three and a half hour chase through Walmart attic. And it just captured my imagination.
And you can't make this shit up. It's
no,
all
you can't. You can't. And there's a site called FloridaMan.com, which gathers all these stories, and there are tens of thousands of them. So it was my goal to take the spirit of these Florida Man stories and encapsulate them in one guy and follow him in his life. But the story, my character, Gary Duba, in many ways is the most admirable character in the book. He's a decent guy. He's just got a hair trigger temper and he makes bad decisions. And he's always looking to make a quick buck. So that's why it's his story of rags to riches, to rags to riches, to rags to riches. But somehow he always ends up back at that trailer in the swamp.
Which honestly, that hooks me right away. And the thing that I think is really great about it is I personally find that things like horror and comedy are particularly difficult to pull off in comics because
I agree with you.
You need those gestures, you need those sound effects, you need to do all those things. But just again, read it. But if you can do it, so I'm not saying it can't be done. It absolutely can be done by the right person. And clearly, just from talking to you, I can tell you're the right person because you have the same exact approach to writing comics that my mentor and co-creator on Yisun Shin, David Anthony Kraft, does. Pretty much everything you're telling me about your process is exactly what he does, what he has taught me to do. And right now, I'm working on my next comic book. And what am I doing? I'm doing an outline. And that outline is going to be drastically different. The outline is a roadmap of where I want to take the story. But where I can and when I can, I want to surprise myself. So then if I can surprise myself, if I can do something and be like, holy shit, then of course it's going to shock the reader because the reader's definitely not going to see it coming.
Yeah, I wish I could tell you what's in the comic, but I can't. It's too shocking, and I want people to be surprised. When I say shocking, I don't mean grotesque or obscene. There's nothing in there beyond a PG-13, but the situations are so outrageous that people are going to burst out loud laughing. I guarantee it. It's not a humor comic with puns and jokes. There are no puns, there are no jokes. It's situational humor that rises out of Gary's life he and his girlfriend Crystal. Have you seen the trailer?
I have not seen the trailer, and to be honest with you, I have to sincerely apologize. I still haven't become a backer on it. And anybody who's watching the show right now, if you haven't backed it yet, join me. I'm going to do it today. I promised Todd when he was on the show that I would do it, and I completely forgot. It's not that I forgot, actually. Here's what happened. I was checking out, and I didn't have my credit card on me, and then I dozed off, and then the next day I had to take care of shit with my kids.
Yeah, don't worry about it, Onrie. Thank you.
No. I want to, because this is a book I want, Mike. This is I'm telling you, I will do it right. I will do it today, because this is the kind of stuff I want. Oh,
yeah.
Here I am knocking stuff off, and the lights are coming on. That's how you know I'm honest.
Yeah, don't go crazy. I can just say this is one book that will exceed everybody's expectations. Trust me, it will exceed your expectations. As soon as you're done reading it, you're going to turn to the person closest to you, thrust the book at them, and say, "You have got to read this."
Absolutely. I have no doubt about that. So let's go on to the artists that you've worked with, because and how you came about finding Todd, because you've worked with a wider range of artists. Steve Rude, the dude. I mean, that dude's a legend, and you guys collaborated on Nexus. How did you find him? How did that whole thing come together? And what have been some of your best collaborations in comics, Marvel, DC, Dark Horse, across the spectrum?
Well, I have good experiences with all of them. I was working at an insurance company in Madison, Wisconsin, when I got a phone call from a newspaper editor who said, "There's a guy down here trying to sell us his art, and he draws just like you," because I was trying to draw at the time. Well, this editor was no judge of art. So that's how I met Steve Rude. But I've worked with a lot of great artists, Brent Eric Anderson, Vail Myerick, Bill Reinhold. I mean, the list just goes on and on.
And now, I know that today, at least my experience is working with artists, we're constantly in touch through email. Rarely do we ever speak on the phone. My Eastern Shin artist and we talk on the phone every once in a while, just to make sure that he understands what direction I want to go with the pages, because I actually draw the layouts for everything, and my art really kind of sucks. So,
That's what I did.
Yeah. And, Dak will draw too sometimes. And, I usually just want to clarify with him. But, back then it's like you didn't really have all that. It was, you were probably barely ever talking on the phone.
Well, that's not true. Steve and I lived in the same city, and we would get together regularly, at least once a week, to go over the pages and look at his thumbnails.
Mm-hmm.
But then he moved to LA, and then he moved to Phoenix. So we've been working electronically for the past few years. And Jeff Butler, the Badger artist, also lived in Madison. I found both those guys in Madison. So we were in close proximity and got together frequently while we were working on those books. No more now, of course. I'm working with artists all over the world.
Mm-hmm. And that transition, I'm assuming, if you had to compare to what was better about the way things were done yesterday, I would assume it would just be the fact that you could actually sit down with the artists and chat with them, as opposed to being so far away and communicating over the internet. Or does that not make a difference for you?
Oh, not really. I mean, we're chatting face to face right now. You're in Chicago and I'm in Colorado.
Yeah.
And I do that with artists I'm working with in Spain and Hong Kong. And if they're up, if we can get together at the same time when we're both up. And my scripts are pretty clear. They're not overly detailed. But they're very clear in what I want. And it's, page 1, panel 1, horizontal, exterior daytime, day, exterior daytime. We're looking at a cheap motel on the outskirts of West Palm Beach, a 1-story motel. There's a neon sign out front that says the Flamingo Motel, and there are a couple of rundown cars in the parking lot. Voices from inside the building, and then I include the dialogue and the captions.
Mm-hmm. So, given that, you have you're providing very clear directions. What happens? How often do you have situations where the artist doesn't get it? Because sometimes I will provide those kinds of directions too, and the artist will just, as much as I feel like the writing needs to shock me as the writer, right? I feel like the art needs to do the same thing, right? Now, when you're selecting artists that you want to work with, what is your process for that to make sure that when you get back those pages, that they don't just like turn out exactly how you wanted it, or, you know, less than what you wanted, but that they shock you? Because it's, you know, I go back to what you said right when the show started, is comics need to have good artists. That, you know, that you need to have good artists on the book.
Well, if they're missing the scene, then I'll explain it to them. And some of this stuff is really subtle, like Cue Ball, which I'm doing with Barry McLean. And so Cue Ball is a martial arts espionage thriller. And there's a certain technique where you can subdue somebody by grabbing two of their fingers and flipping their palm up and bending the fingers backwards. And the first time Barry drew that, he had the palm the wrong side up. In other words, he had the palm facing the ground. You don't want the palm facing the ground. The palm has got to be like this. When you grip these two fingers and bend them back and extend the arm, then you can force somebody to do whatever you want. So I simply put the camera on and demonstrated for Barry right over the internet. Then he got it and he redrew that scene. It's a little subtle thing, but we take great pains to make sure the martial arts are accurate and that the scenes flow in a smooth and dynamic manner.
Yeah, I think that's important, especially, you know, I notice a lot of martial arts books don't really get the sort of the anatomy of, or the action sequences. I mean, you'll show like they'll show a kick or a punch or something, but that's not really like breaking it down. Like, you know, it needs to be, the way I always see martial arts sequences as being effective is kind of like what Paul Galassi was really expert at doing on, you know, Kung Fu, on, you know, which I don't know if you feel the same way, but
I love Paul and I love his art.
G.
And that I started collecting Master of Kung Fu. I couldn't believe how great it was, but I knew from the beginning that those martial arts sequences were bogus.
Yes, they were. The anatomy was off.
He was just drawing poses, and that's not what the reader wants to see. The reader wants to see the technique unfold in a realistic and dynamic manner. And by that, I mean, sometimes you have to get into details, like the proper grip on the hand, or how you throw a person over the hip. Steranko did this once. He had an Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. page, which was broken up into 12 panels, and each panel showed Nick Fury throwing somebody in a legitimate judo throw in a different way. And there are 12 judo throws. There's the hip throw, there's the back throw, there's a trip inside the leg, a trip outside the leg. And that's what people want to see. They say, yeah, that looks real to me. And it's not just a John Wayne punch.
Yeah. Which is what I would say is the way Kirby illustrates stuff. You know, like you got those dynamic action sequences. Maybe it wasn't as researched as, say, what Steranko may have done. But regardless, I would say it was comparable to the John Wayne punches, you know, but with superheroes, you know, and it looked dramatic and exciting.
Yeah, well, I always preferred realistic stories to superhero stories. My work in superheroes notwithstanding, I'm very proud of it, and I love Nexus, and I continue to do it. But the stuff that really attracts me are gritty crime novels. Now, I have 7 out in the biker series now. I just go to Amazon, type my name in, Mike Barron, they'll all pop up. A biker is about a reformed motorcycle hoodlum who goes to prison and finds God and comes out determined to turn his life around. And you know the type. If you're a fan of Philip Marlowe or Jack Reacher or Travis McGee, that's the type that Josh Pratt represents. Somebody who has 1 foot inside the law and 1 foot outside, who serves as a court of last resort for people who have been wronged and can't get justice anywhere else.
Interesting. Yeah, I definitely want to check that out. I don't feel like that's another thing, aside from accurate martial arts books being out there, I don't feel like biker books get tackled enough. You know,
well, I think that mine's the only series that actually does it as crime noir, but there are dozens of series written by women, which are all bodice rippers, and they all show a shirtless, really buff guy, often all inked up on the cover, sweating, with some woman clinging to his leg. Yeah, but God bless them. People love those books, and some of them are far more successful than mine. I just want to do a shout out to Vale Myerick and Jeff Johnson, with both of whom I've worked. They are both accomplished martial artists, and when they draw a fight scene, it shows.
Yeah, I mean, those are guys I actually want to talk to. So, Mike, now let's get into what happens when you get an idea and you want to make it happen. As you mentioned before, you typically don't get the callbacks anymore from Marvel or DC, but fuck them. You don't need those calls anyway. When you get an idea and you want to make that comic, what's your step-by-step process? How do you get it? How do you get it going?
First and most important is I present a pitch. Somebody's going to ask you, what's your story about? And when that happens, you have to be ready. You can't hem and haw. You have to have a prepared sentence or a paragraph. Now, my simplest pitch, and this doesn't work all the time, and it's probably the only one that's only 3 words: Nazi biker zombies, which describes my horror novel Helmet Head. But that's unique because those are 3 words, each of which carries its own baggage, and it's going to trip your senses one way or another. Nazi biker zombies, a lot of people want to read about that. But for the most part, I have a prepared pitch like this. Gary Duba's having a bad day. There's a snake in his toilet, a rabid raccoon in the yard, and his girl Crystal's in jail for getting naked at Waffle Hut and licking the manager. So Gary sets off with his best friend Floyd to sell his prized Barry Bonds rookie card to raise the $500 needed for bail. But things get out of hand. And that's the pitch for Florida Man. On their way to the pawn shop, they get in a road rage incident with a state judge, and they're shooting at each other on the highway. And then Gary peels off to go to the pawn shop, and the judge keeps on driving, but she shows up later. And that's where the lawyer, Habib Rodriguez, comes into play.
And then everything just keeps going from there. So Florida Man, its presentation, tell me about that. You're not crowdfunding the first issue, you're crowdfunding the first trade, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, it started out as a comic, and then I hooked up with Todd. He wanted to be involved because he was doing a story for me for a horror anthology that never materialized, but I liked his art. But when I'd finished 5 scripts, I realized I had a very detailed outline for a novel. So I wrote the novel, and it was snapped up by my publisher and in print a month later. And it's by far my most successful novel under my own name, Florida Man by Mike Barron. There's a sequel out too called Hogzilla. They're both up on Amazon. But novels and comics have different appeal and a different effect.
In a different market.
Right. And then when Chris Brawley stepped up and said, I would love to run this crowdfunding campaign for Florida Man, then I got back into it. So it's like a snake eating its tail. It started as a comic, it turned into a novel, and then it turned back into a comic again. And most of the material in the book we're presenting, which is 64 pages of story, by the way, is new material. It cribs somewhat from the novel, but it's fresh. And I think that we're talking to 2 mutually exclusive audiences here, not for the most part. But I have so much material. We're already planning the next one. I mean, there's stuff in there. I just keep saying people's heads are going to explode. Well, I don't know. Not literally. We haven't seen an exploding head since Scanners, but you know what I mean. I'm pretty certain people are going to dig it.
So when the thing that I like about this whole pitch is you don't have to. One of the things that I feel like is missing, particularly in in some comics today, not all comics, is this idea of community and bringing people together, regardless of our thoughts and our beliefs. And that's not to say that those beliefs are wrong in any way, shape, or form. Let's not get political here. But I think going back to what you said before, when someone picks up a comic and starts reading it, they should be insulted and aggravated if somebody tries to interrupt them from that experience, to pull them away from that. And I really like that you said that, because over the last couple weeks, what I've been doing, as I'm kind of piecing together everything in my head for my next book, is I've just been buying up a shit ton of comics. I've gone to numerous comic shops, and I just became a fan, and just got into it, you know. And there are some comics that I've read that I've just been so enthralled by that if literally anytime my kids would interrupt me, I would, you know, shout at them and be like, leave me alone, get out of here. And then I have comics that just literally were so boring that I would yawn. I even have the desire to yawn just thinking about some of them, you know. And those experiences tend to just not make me want to read comics, period, because you don't feel it. And I'm not picking on Marvel or DC. In fact, some of those boring comics that I was talking about were coming out from alternative publishers. So it's I think that it's not a matter of the message. It's a matter of the idea of the story. What Todd said that I really liked was that superheroes fight supervillains for super stakes. And I really like that idea when we're talking about superheroes. But just in general, it brings everything down to a point where we can all relate. And I think that's something that is important for all material.
Well, as I said, our sole goal is to entertain. I think we've done an outstanding job. I'll let people judge for themselves. But are you familiar with Sturgeons Law?
No, I'm not. Please.
Theodore Sturgeon was a great science fiction writer. Sturgeon's Law is 90% of everything is crap.
Oh, okay. Yes, I've heard Sturgeon's Law. Sorry, my bad.
Only 10% is any good. And I think that that might be a little too harsh. But
yeah,
there's a lot of
I would
truth
say it's more
in
of like a 60-40.
Yeah, there's a lot of truth in that.
There is.
So one thing I don't want to be is I don't want to be in the part that's crap. So everything I do these days, I have to hit it out of the park. I don't let it go under my own name unless I think this is a really gripping story. And I'm working on a bunch of stuff right now. I wish I could tell you about some of it. But it's all, you know, a lot of it's secret. A lot of it isn't finalized. But everything I'm working on, I'm excited about. And if I'm not excited about it, I don't work on it. Because, you know, if you're bored and you write, the reader will sense that. And the writer has to entertain himself. And I'm entertaining myself.
Absolutely. Well, here's another question for you. What's a typical day look like for you, your work day?
Well, I get up at 5:30. I feed the dogs. I sit down. I check my messages. I take the dogs to the park. And when I get back, I usually start writing. I try to do 2 to 3 chapters a day. I'm working on a couple of novels right now. Each chapter is a minimum of 1,000 words and up to about 1,500 words. Those are short chapters, but I found that they work for me. This is my wife, Ann, and this is our dog,
Hi,
Freddie.
Ann. Nice to meet you.
Freddie, look at him. He's sleepy.
Oh, she's saying I'm sleepy?
No, Freddie is sleepy.
Oh, Freddie's sleepy. Okay. I thought she was...
Ann and Freddie make...
Definitely not sleepy talking to you, buddy.
No, they make frequent cameos when I do these shows.
Oh, that's excellent. Yeah. So as you were saying, you write about 2 to 3 chapters of, is it each book, or do you just say today?
I jump around. Right now I'm concentrating on one book that's closer to the finish than any of the others.
Mm-hmm. So you just kind of want to see it through to the end. And what do you do when you come across those kind of, those blocks?
Well, I don't really get blocks, but I mean, I have points where I don't know what happens next. And when that happens, I stop working on that thing. Sometimes I retreat to my bedroom with my notepad and I start writing down anything that could happen next, no matter how bizarre. And sooner or later, you will find the path if you do that. The trick is to step away from the typewriter. Don't feel like you're committing words to paper or to pixels or whatever. Go back to a sketch pad and a pen where you're just doodling and having fun, and the ideas will come to you. You take a look at the character. You take a look at the themes of the book. You want the book to resonate. And by that, I mean the themes that are introduced early in the book surface later. Sometimes they're not just themes. Sometimes they're things, like a plumber's wrench. A plumber's wrench may appear in the second chapter of a novel, and I don't know why. I don't know why that plumber's wrench is there, but when I get up to about the 40th chapter, suddenly that plumber's wrench reveals itself to me and becomes very important to the plot.
You know, it's interesting you say that, because right now that's exactly kind of like, I haven't actually written anything yet for what I did was I wrote the first scene. I wrote a scene for what I thought was originally going to be the opening of my next book. And then after I did that, I felt good about myself. It's like, finally, I fucking wrote something. It's been like months, but like I finally wrote something down. And then I started to kind of like, other ideas kind of started to come to me, and things just kind of started making more sense. And so then I was like, all right, cool. I took a day off and, did other things, like that I had to do. And then I came back on the following day, and I started doing my outline and creating character profiles and things like that. And now what I've been doing is just every time I get an idea, I just kind of lock it in my head and, insert it into the outline whenever I get a chance to, sit in front of the computer and do it. But the one thing I think I've taken the most out of our conversation so far is the idea of having a notepad, which I know it's old. I've just never really had the inclination to carry a notepad with me everywhere I go, because I'm always going somewhere, and it's always hard for me to kind of like, I always have to rely on my memory to
do that. Get yourself a backpack. It'll make it easier. I make a point of writing things down when I think of them, because I know from experience sometimes I'll forget, and I don't want to do that.
And when you say you wake up at 5:30 in the morning to walk your dogs, you're not just walking your dogs. I'm sure you got that notebook with you, and I'm sure you're taking notes as you're doing stuff. So it's kind of a warm up, I would think, or are you just totally focused on the dogs and the nature and clearing your mind?
Well, we have a little group at the dog park where we meet every day, so it's kind of a social thing. But I'll make notes before I go to the dog park, and I always have a notepad in my car so that I can write things down. I have a whole bunch of notepads, but that's another trick. You always have a notepad in your car.
Yeah, that's definitely something I need to start doing. Now, okay, you said you write about 2 to 3 chapters a day. How long does that typically take? Just on average, not, it could always vary.
Well, it might only take like an hour a chapter or 3 hours. I've written for 4 or 5 hours on some days when I couldn't sleep, but that's rare. You don't want to squeeze your brain. And people say, well, I write fast. I try to do 3 to 4 novels a day. But to me, it seems that I write real slow. But I realize that a novelist is like a housing developer. You finish one house and you move on to the next. You don't build one house and expect to get rich and retire off that one house. And I know a lot of novelists like me who are very prolific. My friend Peter Brandvold, the Western writer, probably writes 5 or 6 novels a year. They're short. They're in the 60,000 word length. My friend Kevin J. Anderson writes 3 or 4 novels a year that are over 200,000 words each. But he does that by dictating into a recorder as he hikes through the Rocky Mountains. There are different techniques for everybody. I have to sit and see the words in front of me. That's how I work. Because I play with words a lot, and there's a lot of word play in my novels. Not so much in the comics, because the comics are stripped down, but a novel has room for that sort of thing if you're careful with it.
Mm-hmm. And okay, so you spend let's just say you spend on average maybe about 3 hours writing. Sure. What happens after that? Is it just, kind of time to go and do other things, run other errands, or?
Oh yeah, there's always stuff to do around this house.
Sure.
It's falling apart. I got trees falling apart in the backyard. For years, I had to work on my front lawn, which was turned into a desert. I have it kind of squared away now. I like to ride my bicycle. I go swimming when the weather permits at a local club. I like to get together with friends. We haven't been able to do that much this year. And one of our greatest loves is going out to hear live music. And it's just been dead this year so far. Yeah. And all I have to say is that they have to lift these restrictions because they're destroying lives. And I'm talking about musicians, friends of mine, not just journeyman musicians, but amazing people whose music is just uplifting, that you love to hear, that you get excited about. And there's no place for them to play. Now they're starting to open up a little bit around here. We saw a live act last night and a couple more earlier this year. but only one of them was able to really score, and that was Soul Pride. That's Carlton Pride. He's a reggae artist. He's the most dynamic reggae artist I've ever seen in my life.
That
And
sounds fucking awesome.
and was at an outside venue under the sun, and there were probably maybe 2 or 3 dozen people watching, all spread out in the field. So it was real comfortable, and he had a big amp, so everybody could hear what he was playing.
That's really cool, and I totally know how that feels because I am a gig worker, and that's where I distribute my comics is at comic conventions, and they've pretty much all been canceled at this point.
Yep.
And I was actually supposed to be in Tampa over the weekend.
Maybe.
And I don't know, like the show got canceled a couple weeks ago, and I was really upset about it, and it really did tear me up. But I kind of let that go now because while I agree with you that we should be opening up and that people who are in certain fields that depend on mass gatherings need to find some way to get back to what they're doing. I also, I think we all don't want people to get worse and for things to get worse. And it's really just, we're caught between a rock and a hard place, because saying what you just did, some people could hear it as, oh, this guy doesn't care about anybody. Well, I don't think that's what you're saying. I think that what you're saying is really heartfelt, and you want these musicians who you support to be able to continue to build their dream, to be able to continue to bring their music to the world, to bring their work to the world. And that's an important thing. A lot of people don't have to suffer that because of the kind of jobs that they have, particularly people who are able to work more
I'll
remotely.
tell you who never has to worry about their paycheck: the government.
Yes, they don't. Certainly not.
These people that are issuing these lockdown extensions,
I agree with you. They don't give
over
a shit.
and over, and fining barbers for opening up and lifting their licenses. They never have to worry about their paychecks.
No, they don't. In fact, all they have to worry about is finding ways to raise their paychecks by imposing more taxes. I agree with you.
Life is risk, and what we're talking about here is a risk trade-off. And obviously, we can't remain under lockdown forever.
Yeah. Well, how's it been in Colorado? Because I know you guys are one of the states that lifted early. Illinois, we lifted later, and we're kind of like seeing things creep up and kind of go down a little bit. But how's it been out by you guys?
And we have coronavirus cases, and there are some deaths. I don't know anyone personally who's contracted the virus, but I have friends who do. And a lot of friends are taking precautions. I take precautions. But whenever there's an opportunity to go out and see live music, and usually it's outside, which is a safer environment than inside, we will go.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And another thing, too, that I think is really important right now is probably that you're writing. Because right now, it's like I can imagine that it's therapeutic in some ways, because diving into your stories provides the ultimate form of escapism.
Yes and no. I mean, it's a job, too, but it's a job I love. And as I say, if I'm entertaining myself, I'll entertain others. So I write to entertain. My words get up and walk.
Sure.
I know how to do that.
That's an excellent way of putting it. So when it comes to conventions, how often do you typically do conventions pre-COVID, and what are your plans post?
I'll do 4 or 5 conventions a year. I'll go where I'm invited. I love that Tampa Bay convention. I was there 3 years ago. I'd love to return.
I would think that would be a great opportunity for you to push Florida, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you do about 5 shows a year, and I'm assuming that most of the time you're just basically interacting with fans from your table and doing panels and things like that.
Sure. Seeing old friends, but I haven't done any cons this year. Yeah,
of course. Yeah. No one really has. That's the one thing I kind of miss, but at the same time, I got to say, like, I got to a point now where I'm feeling a lot better about it. I finally finished filing for unemployment, and so I was able to actually get around all the bureaucracy of that. So that kind of lifted my spirits a little bit, because now it's like, at least I got something to hold me over until, the shows pick back up. But it was really not something I wanted to do. I mean, I would rather be out there working and doing stuff. But, now I have all this time to write. And so I figured, if I'm going to not be doing conventions, I need to have that next project. Now I want to go back to something you said before about, writers kind of thinking like, real estate contractors, where they have multiple houses in the works, because you can't just focus on one project to make you filthy fucking rich. You gotta have multiple nest eggs in the works. And the one thing that I've done over the last 10 years is I've only worked on one title and have focused on it, and I've done okay. Like, I've figured out how to make a living doing it. One book.
Let's trade books.
What's that?
We're going to trade books.
Excellent. I would love to, but I'm going to support yours regardless. I want to give you some money. Absolutely. But, regardless of anything, I see a lot of wisdom in what you're saying, when you're saying to jump from project to project, to be able to take on more than one thing. Because for me, it feels daunting, because I've just been focused on this one project, because I really wanted to stand out with my work, and I want to do the same thing with my next project, but I want to change things up a little bit. I really want to be able to, I guess, say, work smarter rather than just working hard. I work really hard on this. I don't know how smart I've been, because it's my first main series, but I've been doing it. I'm very proud of it. I learned a lot working on it, and I'm still working on it. But, starting this new project, it's like I look at it as a new horizon and an opportunity for me to do something different. So what kind of advice can I get from you?
Well, I believe in working on several projects at once. I know you have more than one idea in your head. And even if you're not actively working towards making that a reality, you should be working on laying down the groundwork. Start writing an outline. I can't tell you how many outlines I've written for projects that never came to fruition. But I have written projects. I have written outlines that I thought would never go anywhere. And then years later, I've been able to sell them. So just keep a 2-track mind or a 4-track mind. One thing you can always do is retreat with your sketch pad and just start writing down ideas of what you want to do. And an idea can be something as simple as, I want to do noir crime. We all know what that is. It's the Maltese Falcon, the postman always rings twice. It's those movies from the 40s about doomed losers. It's Philip Marlowe. It's the Continental Op. It's Travis McGee and John D. MacDonald. I love that. That was my first love. And that's one of the things I'm working on, but not the only thing, because I've always loved comics too. And I've seen comics as a legitimate means to tell any kind of story, except I will say this, that they are the worst medium for horror. And yet that doesn't really affect the sale of horror comics. People love horror comics.
And I'll tell you, some comics in the horror genre have actually disturbed me, like Cross. I don't know what it was about it. I think it was the artwork, but I remember there was a scene in the very beginning of the book where this dad and his wife and daughter were escaping the Cross. And he was saying that he heard that baking soda, kind of like stopped them in their tracks and killed them right away. And all the other survivors were like, that's a really stupid idea. But he was so certain of it. Well, they're traveling, and the daughter breaks the leg, her leg. She trips and falls, and she can't get up and broke her leg. And his wife's like, shoot her and shoot me and shoot yourself, because we're done for it. He's like, no. And you see him pulling out his baking soda thinking that he's going to get him. And then you turn the page and there's just a spread of, the dad being butt fucked by the Cross while, having his guts, cut open, the daughter totally ripped in half, and the wife turning while being raped and saying, you fucking bastard, I told you this wouldn't work. And, that to me was really graphic and horrifying, and it really dug at me. I mean, so to say that it can't be done is not true, because I
True.
think it's just done in a different way. It's done in a more cerebral way. And I think that's the same thing it can be said about comedy. It's about those punchlines, right? And how you deliver it. And I am so excited to see how you pull it off in Florida, man, because that's got to be tough.
Shout out to Will Callaghan. Thanks, Will.
Yeah,
Will's
thanks for watching, Will. Yeah, I see. We got quite a few watchers today. You got quite a fan base here.
Oh, really?
Yeah, of course. Well, you didn't notice it? Here you are
No.
killing it on Indiegogo, old comic book rock
I have no
star.
idea how many people are watching.
Well, I do. Right now I have 40 viewers watching the show, so that's always a good thing. And the show is going to be on for ever now. So as time goes on, more and more people are going to watch it, and that's always going to help with everything too. So Mike, we're actually coming to the end of the episode right now, and I wanted to give you a chance to do a final shout out. Tell us where we can find you. Tell us how we can support you right now, and I'm going to give you the center stage again, sir.
Thank you, Onrie. Follow me on Twitter at Bloody Red Baron. On Facebook, I have a Mike Baron author page. Please sign up. I have a YouTube channel, Ann and Mike Baron. Please sign up. And if you don't go to Amazon, type my name in. A lot of my stuff will pop up. Florida Man is on Indiegogo. All you have to do is go to Indiegogo and put in Florida Man graphic novel, and it will pop up. And please watch the video. The video alone will make you laugh.
Excellent. My friend, thank you so much for everything. Thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to sit down with me and to chat with us. And you've given me a lot to think about, and have imparted some wonderful wisdom onto me and to our audience. So thank you so much for your time, and always a pleasure talking to a legend in the field.
Thank you, Onrie.
Absolutely, man. Take care, my friend. There we go. What a great episode. What an awesome guy. Mike Baron, everyone. I got to say that talking with people who have added experience in the industry and seeing them continuously go at it is extremely inspiring to me. The way I see it is there's really no retiring for us. When we get into this, we're kind of already stepping into it because we're retired, right? So we're doing this because we love it. And every comic book creator that is prominent and well-known and is no longer with us was working on something until the day they died. And Mike Baron, he strikes me as the kind of guy who's just going to keep going onward. And that to me is incredibly inspiring, as I hope it is to you. Tomorrow we got another legend in the house, and I am so excited to be talking with him. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I'm really revamping things right now. A lot of ideas have come to me. Now that pretty much the entire convention season is canceled for 2020, I'm thinking of ways to revamp stuff and to make sense of everything that's going on. So this week I will be bringing back the Journeyman episodes of my show, Onward with Onrie. So that's going to be Onward with Onrie. And this show that you're watching is called Live with Onrie. So we're going to be doing Live with Onrie about twice a week now. And we're going to do Onward with Onrie once a week. And the rest of the time I'm going to be working on my new project. So with the Onward with Onrie, what I'm going to be focusing on is sort of the things that I'm discovering as I absorb new material and as I continue to craft what will be the first issue of my next book, which I'm really hoping will come out next year. I'm putting a little bit more pressure on it on myself to get something out there quicker so that I have something new to present by the time that conventions pick back up. And I think that there is some good that may have come from all this, because otherwise I probably would not have had the opportunity to really sit down and be alone with myself with the chance to really figure out what my next project's going to be. And as I've mentioned before on multiple occasions, I really want to get outside of history, not because I have anything particularly against history, but just to show that, look, I can do other things, and I want to do other things too. You never want to, as a writer, you don't want to just fall into a certain category and stay in that category. You want to kind of show that you can adapt and that you have some range. So that's something that I'm going to be working on, and we'll see where things go. So I will see you guys tomorrow. Brand new episode, awesome guest. I will tell you guys who it is tomorrow morning. If you haven't yet, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Do it right now. Hit that subscribe button. And I will see you guys tomorrow with a brand new episode. And until that time comes, onward to victory.